more people. Should I start again? The recording began. New York State incarcerates more people for parole rule violations than anywhere else in the country, and that you see no evidence that locking people up for missing appointments with parole officers, failing to report a change of address, testing positive for drugs or alcohol, or being late for curfew helps the public safety. And this is not a debate, it's just a question. How or will your office, or how does your office plan to get people to respect the system? I agree with a lot of what you say, what you've said in the past when you were running. But I wonder, how do we get people to follow the rules? You know, locking them up doesn't help either, but do you have any ideas when it comes to parole rule violations?
Definitely. So thank you for having me tonight. Great to see you. I will always be available to y'all. And I see my friend Liz Crotty on. She's got my cell phone. In fact, we were texting, so you always will have me. You know, I'll start with the specific example you gave. You know, the on technical parole violations. I think very broad consensus on that issue. You know, so I joined with Cy Vance in authoring an op-ed on that issue about Rikers and about releasing people who are in on technical violations. And 2 days later, I'm not saying because of it, but a lot, of course, many voices, the governor signed the Less is More Act, changing the law on that. So I am, you know, on that issue. I mean, you know, yeah, being on places on time is important. I think we have other levers, you know, the carrot and stick things short of incarceration. In terms of respecting the rules, I think we got to use the full tools in the toolkit. You know, so we've got administrative authority, we've got civil authority, a number of things other than incarceration. But I'm a rule follower by nature myself. I guess most lawyers probably are, and certainly most prosecutors are. So I think we've got to have the rules followed, but I just don't think the sanctions should necessarily be incarceration. We've got a lot of ones. You know, I use as an example the Easy Pass one. If I were to run through my Easy Pass, you know, and not have paid it, they're not going to send, you know, officers to pull me off on the side of the road. They're going to send me a letter, and if I don't pay that, then they're going to send me another letter of interest, and then we have heightened, you know, in gradation. So I just think we got to be careful about which levers we're pulling and when and for what purpose, and be very conscious about it.
In other words, saving money by sending first warning letters and things like that from parole officers.
Well, yeah, look, I think in the parole context, that, you know, there's not, if what you really want to get is someone working again, you know, sending them to jail because they're 5 minutes late to your appointment is not gonna. So I think we always have to think about the ultimate, you know, goal, what we're trying to achieve, and connect our interim steps to that ultimate goal.
Thank you. In one of your emails of September 17th, I picked up, it states that you, as you just mentioned, you joined with DA Cy Vance and our new governor, Hochul, where she signed the Less is More Act to drastically reduce unnecessary incarcerations and racial disparities in the justice system. Can you tell us what the Less is More Act contains that will reduce unnecessary incarcerations other than what you just discussed? Is the Less is More, you know, what we just discussed, or is this a new act that she signed?
It's the heart of what we just discussed, and I'll tie it into the racial disparities because that was part of your question. So, you know, the data show that it's 11 times more likely that you'll be violated on a technical parole violation if you're Black than if you're not. And so, rolling that back and also giving due process protections prior to, a violation being, or in connection with a violation being adjudicated, is what the Less is More Act is about.
Okay, thank you. During your campaign, you mentioned that you plan to do a number of things, and among them were to create a high-quality, victim-centered, dedicated sex crime unit to get justice for brave survivors. This is a longer question. I'm sure you could. B, to conduct a full audit of prosecution of sexual crimes, followed by implementation of ongoing analysis, measure the outcomes and not just conviction rates. You back increased transparency, increased training to promote a survivor-centered, trauma-informed response. And F, letter F, to promote outreach and education to increase trust and the reporting of crimes. You mentioned that you will dismantle the current sex crimes unit and replace it with a new one. So my question right off the bat is, can you tell us why you chose the sex crime unit to analyze and change right off the bat? Was there something about that unit that you felt needed some kind of reformation or transformation?
Definitely. So, so there are other areas of the office that I want to change as well, but this is a key one, and it grows out of we've all know, well, maybe all know, I'll mention them. Some high profile cases, right, with Robert Haddon, a gynecologist at Columbia, who received a probation disposition, notwithstanding allegations that now are kind of more than 100 of patients that he assaulted, in connection with him to being their gynecologist. Harvey Weinstein, Jeffrey Epstein. There were a number of high profile incidents, but I think more important in this, naming, names, is the conversations I've had with survivors, including 2 roundtables I did this week. A sense and a feeling of kind of a coarseness with the office, a questioning process that is, if you go in and you report, that someone stole your iPhone, you'll be, a supposition will be that it occurred, and you'll be questioned in that way, and a feeling among survivors that was not the case when they came forward, creating a negative feedback loop, making it harder than to come forward. So that's where it comes from. It comes from doing a lot of listening to people who've engaged, who've complained, and they sort of procedural justice. Obviously, no one can and then also from a sense of someone who's a trial lawyer who's done a number of challenging trials, that the sense that the office has got to be prepared to try cases that are challenging, and not shrink away from it if you think you obviously have to have the facts and the law, but challenging cases, a real feedback I'm getting from not just survivors, but groups that support survivors, groups like Sanctuary and Safe Horizon and others, that the DA's office is not going forward with cases where they might think the person's guilty, might know the person's guilty, but think they're going to lose, and so even though they think the person's guilty, aren't going forward. That's what I'm hearing from survivors, and that's what's driving me to focus on reforming that unit.
I thank you. Can you tell us which of those other areas that I mentioned do you find more of an eye opener to you? There were a number, as I mentioned. There were, other than the sex crime unit, the increased training. What other area? Let me rephrase this. It's day one. DA Alvin Bragg walks into his new office. Now, your head's already formulating certain projects that you know on day one, I want to move on this. What are some of the important changes that the public can expect from your new office as district attorney? Besides sex crimes, what do you feel needs to be addressed immediately as the incoming district attorney?
All right. So we actually have a memo entitled Day One Memo
Okay.
on our website that maps out what we want to do on day one. We did it during the primary. Let me kind of start with what's most on my mind these days, which is guns. So I had a shootout on my block on Saturday. So when I returned, I had to guide my family past the yellow police tape and get escorted into my home with a live gun next to the evidence tag on the ground and shells around. So we've had a number of incidents. Guns are important for so many reasons, and gun violence is clearly up. It's not just important for the individual incidents, but of the kind of 7 index crimes, it is the one that is the biggest driver of people's feeling of safety. I outlined on that memo things we want to do there in terms of building cases where we're tracking guns and doing gun trafficking cases. I want to give credit to the current office. They did the kind of case I want to do a lot more of. They arrested a doorman who was involved in sales of 80 guns last week.
80?
80.
Really?
Yeah. Significant.
I noticed, not to interrupt you, that the issue of guns for you as a person stemming back in your own personal history is also something that, what did I have? I found that at 1.6 times you've had a gun pointed at you since you were a child.
That's correct. Those incidents were mostly during my childhood. I'd say about 6 times before I was 21. So 3 by the police during unconstitutional searches and 3 not by the police. But I will tell you, far more sobering than that is, seeing it through the eyes of your children, right? So, navigating home with my 11-year-old and 15-year-old, or then just, was it last night or 2 nights ago, meeting my daughter at the train station, my daughter who gets around, pretty autonomously, but, 3 days after a shooting is, I don't want to speak for her, but clear from her actions, feeling differently about her neighborhood. So yes, those early incidents, but also these more recent ones. And so, we need to, that's a day one project. Another day one project is our conviction integrity. You compare our conviction integrity review to other offices, it's anemic. And it's not independent. So
What does that mean, conviction integrity?
Thank you. Sorry for speaking in
That's
legal.
okay. That's because I don't know, and I'm an attorney myself. So I'm used to asking people, would you please explain?
Right. So, the process where we look back and look at old cases and exonerations, that's a understaffed and under performing part of the DA's office. I would say guns. You started with sexual assault. I'd say guns. I'd say conviction integrity. And then we got to, talk about the conditions at Rikers, which are, I've been talking with, medical staff there. It is just a combustible, untenable environment that I think actually may not get to January. That's something, I don't want to be alarmist, but that's something, it's got to happen before January. So hopefully it's not a day one issue because people have looked at it. And that's obviously a number of these are things I want to be coordinating on with City Hall. But that's the top line. And as I said, we've got a day one budget that maps this out.
What is an alternative for Rikers?
Well, I think in the moment, so the day-to-day issue, which I think is we have to think about separately from the sort of longer term, it's just the conditions. We've got like one correction officer, working triple shifts, not just one, but, that's happening with frequency. We've got, I just left the program, a roundtable on reentry that we convened with a service provider who's got staff on Rikers. He was telling us about the conditions and talking about how, he's got folks who are in custody, who are going to their commissary, providing some of that food to the correction officer because the person hasn't left his post in 72 hours to eat. That's crazy. And so some of that, as I say, is sort of executive, branch issues. But that was why less is more is important to remove some people. I think there are additional people that we can get off the island. And then I think also we just got to get more correctional officers on there. So
I don't think this is such a new issue either. I remember many years ago, and I don't know whether it was the federal district court justice Weinstein, who had been alerted time and time again that Rikers was too crowded. And it might have had something to do with speedy trial in addition, that there were too many people. It was just a mess. And he let out a number of people from jail based on this. This might have been 10 or 15, maybe 20 years ago. Rikers has been an issue for years.
Yeah. The biggest driver at this moment is length of stay. Obviously the courts are not, I think our mayor has pointed to the courts kind of as, single-handedly responsible. I think there's a lot of responsibility to go around, and some of it is just the reality of COVID. But I know that, they implemented some stepped up video measures recently. But yes, there's nothing new under the sun, as they say, Sylvia.
The mayor can accuse the judges, but the judges are also very concerned, especially, you hear this when we're involved, these are political clubs with people that are running for civil court. And usually one of the early places they're posted after they win an election is often you do your time in criminal court. And there's a lot of fear out there that this person or that person might have a record, and it might be, a dangerous record. And yet the misdemeanor, the bail situation has changed. A lot of people are now under new rules that you don't issue bail, and then they're afraid that, today or tomorrow their faces are going to be on the cover of a newspaper because they, as the judge, have let somebody walk. And I understand that also. And that, of course, goes to the overcrowding and the fear. So when the court says that, when the mayor says that the judges are, putting people in pending whatever their cases or a psychiatric assessment, I think that's what the judges on the other side of the bar are afraid of. What do you do in a situation like that? Usually you're taking a DA's recommendation. The DA comes in highly specialized in knowing what the value of a case is. Okay, we got something wrong with I'm not hearing you.
No. I just have to call to my daughter for something. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
So, when I look at this, you feel that it's an explosive situation. I could, and it probably is, it might not make it till January because Rikers is a major issue. And I think it's something that unfortunately is going to land in your lap one way or the other. As the district attorney, you have some major challenges that you're going to be facing.
Yeah, no, look, I don't suggest that they will be resolved by January 1st, although I do think that we need system actors to act. There's some issues that you can wait till January 1st and say the next person is going to handle that. I think that the mayor and the DAs are focused on it now.
That's good.
Need measures in place now.
That's good. I'll move on to another topic. Well, it's not really another topic. I'm back to guns. You've outlined, or would you outline for us, your 6-point plan to the best that you can to reduce guns on the street, including what you mean by the following. You could tell I'm an attorney and I quote a phrase I didn't think others might understand. You said, we can make our cities safer from gun violence through smart, evidence-based policies that center on equity and justice. So for starters, for the people that are not attorneys that are here visiting tonight, what do you mean by evidence-based policies?
Well, so we know where the guns are coming from. When I was at the Attorney General's office, we looked at every gun found at a crime scene in the state of New York and traced it back to its last lawful sale from a federal licensed firearms dealer. So we know where they're coming from, and for me, that's the starting point for investigations. We can literally look at the data; it's a blueprint. So that's a cornerstone of what I want to do. Like I mentioned, the case brought last week. I like to give credit where credit's due. 80 guns no longer on the street that can be used. We need to be doing a lot more like that. We also need to be using our community interrupters. I had lunch with Senator Schumer earlier this week, and he was saying in the reconciliation bill, he's going to put $5 billion in, or he's looking to put $5 billion in to fund community-based community violence interrupters. We know when there's a incident that occurs, often there's a counter incident, a retaliation. We've got groups that are kind of, working, justice-involved people who are literally running to the fire to mediate and stop and de-escalate. So certainly support that funding. I'm sure our majority leader will make sure a fair share of it makes its way to our city and our borough. And then we have traditional prosecutions, right? I've done cases from gun prosecutions, from possession to armed robbery, and obviously we've got to hold accountable people who are using guns or poised to use them.
Thank you. Now you have your 6-point plan consisted of, that I found, community intervention, targeted enforcement, removing risky guns, disrupting the iron pipeline, as you called it, ghost guns, and legislature. Of these points, which one do you find most capable of achieving quickly during this early term of office that you'll be entering?
Quickly, it's interesting. I think we can put it all into motion. Sadly, I think some of these problems are not quick, right? I mean, our guns that are on the street, we're not going to make them evaporate. We can stop new ones from coming. So I don't know, and I don't want to, sell the moon, so to speak, that any of it is quick. We can get to work on day one, but I don't think these are issues. I mean, like I said, literally on my block on Saturday, 4 days before that, 3 blocks away from me, literally the round table I was coming from at my church, there was another shooting on the corner. So I mean, there's a lot of work to be done, and I don't want to suggest that an overnight solution to this. This is hard stuff. it's putting in the work, it's following the leads, it's following the money, following the guns. The community groups are working, but they're under-resourced. I had a roundtable on guns earlier this week with people who are doing the violence interruption, and in the middle of it, one of the groups got a call in their catchment area and they had to go. And they talked about how they're stretched thin. So that I think that funding, if it comes through, would be phenomenal. But I don't think any of these are. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, on day 2 we're going to have solved gun violence. But I think these plans are a roadmap that when we look back at the end of the year, that gun violence will be down appreciably.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you this last question and then go straight to the questions because I understand you have to leave. I note that under the topic in eliminating racial disparities, you stated that you oppose the use of the New York Police Department's quote, gang database, and you pledge not to use any data form from the database. Can you explain what is the gang database?
Yeah.
So we can go to some questions and why you are opposed to that. What was it about that rubbed you the wrong way or you felt was unjust?
Sure. Look, so it's opaque is the first issue. There's no, standard to get in it. There's no way other than a floral question or if you're on it. And the procedure by which you get off of it is also unclear. So I would never build a case on that. In fact, I've in my learning tour, I've been talking to, folks in the office who don't use it, seasoned prosecutors. I mean, there's ways to build cases, but a list that is opaque and I can't tell you how you get on or how you get off and maybe stale is not one that I'm going to rely on. I've built cases that have dismantled organizations. I've done it through wiretaps. I've done it through confidential informants. And so, building real proof that's admissible, the gang database, it's not admissible proof. It's not anything you can use in court.
I can understand that. Okay, let's go to the questions. Mindy, do we have a question here?
Yes, Fran had her hand earlier in the program, then we have David, and I see Charles has his hand.
Okay, Fran, let's go to Fran. Fran?
You're on mute, Fran.
You need to unmute Fran.
You have to,
You got
Okay, Fran, thank you.
see, Alvin, Fran has appointed state committee. 2 questions. I have a comment and a question. Do you have any budget freedom to implement your ideas? And are you also going to do this yourself, or are you going to hire people to help with some of this work?
Oh, so yeah, we're definitely not gonna do it by myself. I used to oversee the Attorney General's office, more than 1,500 people, and every single one of them was doing the work. And same thing here, we got 500 lawyers and another 700 staff, and we're gonna, it's what I'm in the process of doing now. We don't want to put the cart before the horse, but we're talking to people in the office, outside of the office. I think we want to have a mix of new and a mix of old for continuity. So we want to put people in positions to kind of maximize their core competencies, if you will. So we're doing that now. And I think the team is essential. I mean, we spent a lot of time during the primary season in particular, issuing policies, which I think it's great to have policies. We need to have a vision and a roadmap. But if we don't have the right people executing and implementing them, they'll just be words on a piece of paper. In terms of budget freedom, there is and there isn't. So there is not in the sense that, we talk a lot about the asset forfeiture funds that were, derived from, large white collar cases that the DA's office is used for a variety of purposes, probably most notably, the testing of rape kits. That money, I'm told from the DA's office and from those who are implementing it, is near gone. So either gone or contractually committed. So we're going to have to find other ways. I mean, some great work that's being done is the funding's likely going to end. Some of it's been baseline in the budget. Much of it has not. So we're going to have to work with the city council and city hall. But where we do have flexibility is that within the DA's budget, right? Moving things around. I want to really prioritize long-term investigations, which I think really have enduring safety benefits, as opposed to what I call kind of the churn cases where people churn in and out. And we've been doing that for 25 years. We've tried that. We need to shift to the more long-term investigations like these 80 guns I was talking about. So that's the freedom, really, to move them up around within the DA budget.
Now I have a suggestion.
Wait, Fran, we got two more and he has to go.
And
Very quick.
Diana raised her hand as well.
It's a very quick
Okay.
suggestion. Albert, it seems to me that a lot of these infractions of paroles, there should be two things: a handbook describing what people have to be careful of, and two, perhaps a form that they can send in when something happens, like their mother gets sick and they have to go to the hospital, or something which would interfere with what they have to do. And it seems to me that that's on us to be able to teach people how to be better at what they have to do on parole.
Okay, Fran, thank you. The next one is David. Was it David Warren,
Hi, yes,
our former president? Go
a
ahead, David.
belated congratulations to you on your primary victory. My question is to deal with the right-of-way law, which was just implemented, which is great. One of the cases actually happened in our district on 26th Street, and that was a bus driver murdered a cyclist. And what happened was he accelerated and while the cyclist was going, but part of the issue was, and this was never brought up in the case, and I want to know how you would handle it, was there was a van that was illegally parked, and that bicyclist had to go around that van that was illegally parked. But that van was never charged, similar to the Central Park case with a taxi. They were never charged. I'd like to know if maybe you would charge that person also who illegally parked, because their actions led to the death of this cyclist. And how do you interpret the right-of-way law, and how will you expand on it to protect cyclists from crashes and pedestrians?
Yeah, no, I understand the question. I'll say I bought a bike during COVID to get around early COVID, and rode around for a little bit, and then when traffic picked back up, stopped riding because it just was too dangerous, certainly for my biking abilities. But it gave me a different view of the road. So I'm certainly sensitive, and I think in a way that I was not before. I'm not so sure that a criminal case lies there. I don't know all the facts, but someone who's double parked may be liable for double parking. But I'm not so sure that there's a charging, theory. I'd have to hear more about that specific facts. But certainly going to take seriously, collision cases, and I think there's one. It's one area where, well-placed cases will have a good deterrence value. And there's some areas, I used to think that the public corruption cases would have, you'd think we would have some deterrence, but every year we look up after we do one and there's another official taking a bribe or something. But here, I think other motorists would take notice, when they're well-placed cases where appropriate. But I just don't know the facts of that one.
Okay, we'll now go to my co-leader, Charles Bayer. I think you have a question, Charles. Charles, you have to unmute yourself.
Hi, Alvin.
There you go.
My question is the continued use of solitary confinement, which I find to be a very immune. It's just not human to confine people in solitary for amounts of time, it's destructive to their physical and to their mental health. And how do you feel about that?
I agree with you. Like a lot of these issues, I come to it, both professionally and personally. So, professionally, I've sued a facility for medical care issues in Nassau, and it was a facility where there'd been the contractor had deaths on its watch, including deaths connected to solitary. And then my brother was in solitary confinement, my brother-in-law. And so, I know I never get out of my mind. We've talked about, his entire process. He lived with me after he was incarcerated. And so we talked about a lot of it in real time, but we never really talked as much about solitary, kind of put it away. And I'll never forget the description when he talked about it. All he could do were push-ups and read the Bible, for days on end. So it's not like it was rehabilitative or anything. And he ended up there as quite a young person, because near the beginning of his time in custody, someone took his dinner, and he realized if he didn't, grab his dinner back, he wasn't going to eat. And that fight is how he ended up in solitary.
That's
Thank you. Thank you.
an unfortunate story, really. We're going to run now to Diane, because I know your time is very limited, and I want to be respectful of the fact that you have a commitment. We have Diana. Diana, are you unmuted?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Thank you very much. Okay, let's go
Okay,
with your question.
Okay, hi, Alvin. Nice to meet you on my flat screen. I appreciated that Sylvia earlier brought up the question of ghost guns, because it's been on the news, network news, every network for the last couple of weeks. It's a really big concern. My question is, so how connected are things like ghost guns and drug dealing? And if so, are these two things ever prosecuted at the same time?
So ghost guns are real. I would say I'm also concerned. I mean, it's very interesting the attention that ghost guns have gotten recently, particularly given the problem we have with actual traditional guns. They are both problems, and so I would probably put them both together. Ghost guns are a particular problem because they evade the kind of tracking that I mentioned earlier. And so we've got, I would say, ghost guns, yes, hand in hand with drug dealing, although traditional guns are as well. And then we've got another sort of, I would say, phenomenon of like the group gun, the neighborhood gun, which is the shared gun where, a group can go, and get it and pick it up. So all issues that are interconnected. A district attorney out west actually brought a suit against manufacturers of kind of component parts for ghost guns, and that's something we want to look into. I don't know that we've got the authority, and maybe something more for the attorney general here, but yeah, we got to be looking at all that.
Thank
And
you.
now we're going to move to Roberta. Roberta, a longtime member of Chelsea Reform. Are you unmuted, Roberta?
I'm unmuted.
Okay.
And
go
I was delighted to carry your dear neighbor letter when you were running. So I'm delighted to see you here. But I have a question, because I remember many years ago having some terrible issue with landlords, and we were closed out of the district attorney's office. It took 1 year to get a prosecution against that landlord because of politics. So my question is twofold. First question is, how do you plan to keep politics out of the district attorney's office? And connected to that, how are you going to keep members of the community, how are we going to get access to your office to make sure that things are prosecuted that are damaging to our community?
Yeah, so look, we're going to
Thank
keep
you,
on
Roberta.
doing this, right? I mean, the community engagement part of the office is going to grow. I mean, I have the org chart now. It's not large. Obviously, we want to dedicate resources to doing cases, but in order to be guided by the community, in touch with the community, we need people who are out and about in the community. And so we're going to scale up that function. You know, we've been doing a lot of roundtables, some on substance areas, you know, guns, domestic violence, reentry, some that we're planning by neighborhood. You know, we're talking to the political clubs. You know, we're talking to, you know, houses of worship. We're talking to, you know, block associations. You know, now I think we'll have a structure. It won't be all me. To the earlier question about will there be a team? We're building a team to build out the community engagement work, but I think part of the work has got to be having an ear to the ground of the community needs. As for politics, you know, I don't know. I mean, we did, you know, tenant harassment work at the Attorney General's office. You know, we'll continue to do that here. You know, we did criminal cases. I think part of the issue was that those cases were not being done with frequency before. But, you know, I'm not a politician, right? This is the first time I've run for anything. The biggest through line in my career is public corruption work. You know, prosecuted the state majority leader, prosecuted, you know, mayor of Mount Vernon for campaign finance fraud, another upstate mayor for bribery, prosecuted a council member for bribery. You know, Republicans, Democrats. I think one I think maybe it was a Republican, a Democrat, and an independent, depending upon the time you checked in. So I'm just going to keep on doing that.
Great. Thank you.
Very much. And that leaves us to 7:44, and you must leave at 7:45. And I do not want to keep you from where you have to go, because the president of our club is very, very punctual and sensitive as to your timing. So I want to thank you, DA Alvin Bragg, for coming. I don't know if we'll have the opportunity to get you back. Will you be visiting clubs in the future?
I will be. I mean, hopefully in person. And like I said, we're going to be building out our team so that there'll be others as well available. And I look forward to it. And you call me DA, but I've still got November 2nd. So I encourage everyone to go out and
We carried your petitions. I don't think you have a problem.
I know this is an active group. Y'all aren't going to forget November 2nd. So.
No, and thank you so much for coming. And I'm going to hold you to it, to coming back and to see us. I know you're going to have a lot on your plate and it won't be for a while, but I hope that you'll come around if you can, if it's allowed, for holiday parties and say hello, and, you know, for brunches and things like that. So the community can, you know, get to see you and meet you up front and center, and not in a pandemic environment, as most people had to, you know, campaign and politic this year. So stay well. Have a good night. Thank you for
so
coming.
much.
Thanks so much. Have a good night, y'all.
Bye now.
Thank you, everyone. Sylvia, great job. Thank you, everyone.
Are we?
Thank you, Sylvia.